Pastor Jamal Bryant's New Year's Eve sermon has the internet buzzing, and not for the reasons you'd expect. Viewers are calling it demonic, shocking, and even from hell. From fiery language to controversial claims, this sermon has left congregants stunned and social media in an uproar. Today we're breaking down exactly what happened during this jaw-dropping service and why so many people are talking about it worldwide. Welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're diving into one of the most talked about sermons of the year, Pastor Jamal Bryant's New Year's Eve message that has left viewers shocked, confused, and some even calling it demonic. This is not your typical end-of-year sermon filled with hope and reflection. Instead, it's a fiery, controversial, and deeply intense message that has sparked debates across social media and religious circles alike. In this video, we're going to break down what happened during the sermon, the most shocking moments, the reactions from congregants, and the public fallout. We'll examine the claims, the imagery, and the language Pastor Bryant used, and provide context so you understand why this message has gone viral. By the end of this video, you'll have the full picture, including details that mainstream coverage has barely touched. Make sure you stay tuned until the very end, because some revelations are so shocking, they've left even longtime followers questioning what they just witnessed. To truly understand the shock of Jamal Bryant's New Year's Eve sermon, we have to look at the man behind the pulpit. Jamal Bryant has long been a prominent figure in the world of modern preaching, known for his fiery delivery, dramatic stage presence, and messages that mix spiritual insight with social commentary. He has built a reputation as a pastor who doesn't shy away from controversy, someone who challenges his congregation to confront uncomfortable truths while delivering sermons that are memorable, even viral. Over the past few years, Bryant's popularity has grown significantly. His church services routinely attract thousands, and his online sermons reach tens of thousands more, often shared across social media platforms. Followers admire his passion and energy, but critics have long noted that some of his messages tread the line between spiritual inspiration and sensationalism. This tension between admiration and skepticism would play a key role in the response to his New Year's Eve service. The build-up to the sermon was significant. Social media and church announcements had hyped it as a New Year's Eve experience, promising powerful spiritual reflection, life-changing declarations, and a fiery message to ring in the new year. Members of his congregation were expecting a sermon full of encouragement, vision for the coming year, and perhaps some dramatic flair. But what actually unfolded was something far more intense, and for many, deeply unsettling. Reports indicate that the stage setup was already signaling a departure from his typical services. Dark lighting, dramatic music, and ominous imagery set a tone that immediately created tension and anticipation. Some attendees later described feeling an almost eerie energy as the service began, a sense that this would not be a conventional sermon. Videos from the event circulated online, showing Bryant delivering a high-energy message with intense expressions, rapid-fire delivery, and words that many interpreted as alarming or even demonic. It's also important to understand that Bryant has a history of blending scripture with bold declarations about societal and spiritual struggles. He has addressed issues like personal failures, spiritual warfare, and confronting evil in ways that sometimes leave listeners stunned. But the New Year's Eve sermon seemed to take this approach to a new level, incorporating imagery and language that were darker, more aggressive, and more confrontational than anything he had done before. For many attendees, the sermon felt like stepping into a spiritual battlefield rather than a reflective celebration of the new year. And as the messages escalated, viewers began posting live reactions on social media, describing what they were witnessing as unlike any sermon they had ever seen. Comments ranged from shocked disbelief to outright fear, with some questioning whether Bryant had crossed a line between passionate preaching and something more disturbing. The night of December 31st began like any other high-profile church service for Jamal Bryant, but as the sermon progressed, it became clear that this was no ordinary message. Attendees immediately noticed a difference in tone. The music was darker and more intense. The lighting shadowed the stage in ways that gave the impression of entering an entirely different spiritual dimension, and Bryant's energy was unlike his usual charismatic delivery. It was urgent, fiery, and at times almost confrontational. The sermon opened with what many described as an aggressive call to spiritual warfare. Bryant warned his congregation about the dangers of spiritual complacency, using vivid language that referenced demonic forces, evil influences, and the importance of purging negativity from one's life. While warnings of spiritual danger are not uncommon in his preaching style, the intensity of the imagery, references to hell, demonic oppression, and battles against unseen forces, was far more extreme than typical sermons, creating a sense of unease among some attendees. As the sermon continued, Bryant's language became even more alarming. He spoke of people in the congregation being possessed by negative energies, using phrases that some interpreted as accusatory or threatening. Witnesses later described moments where Bryant paused, scanned the crowd, and called out individuals to release the darkness within, which led to visible reactions of shock, discomfort, and even fear among listeners. Videos circulated online showing him delivering these statements with an intense gaze and elevated voice, making the sermon visually and emotionally overwhelming. In addition to the aggressive language, the imagery used during the sermon added to the controversy. Dark-colored lights, shadowy projections, and symbolic props created a theatrical atmosphere that many said felt reminiscent of a spiritual horror scene rather than a traditional church service. Some commentators suggested that the combination of aggressive rhetoric and ominous visuals contributed to why so many people described the sermon as demonic, a term that spread rapidly across social media following the event. But it wasn't just the visuals and language. The sermon also contained controversial spiritual claims. Bryant reportedly spoke about removing curses and negative spirits from members in ways that some interpreted as extreme or unusual. He referenced personal attacks from evil forces and implied that some congregants had been unknowingly influenced by demonic activity. While spiritually metaphorical language is common in preaching, the level of intensity, combined with the live, theatrical presentation, pushed many observers to label the message as shocking, alarming, or even frightening. What made the sermon even more viral was how attendees and online viewers reacted in real time. Live clips began circulating, showing congregants raising their hands in apparent fear or surprise, some visibly distressed, others confused but captivated. Social media erupted with clips and screenshots, with hashtags referencing the demonic nature of the sermon, debates about spiritual warfare, and intense discussions about whether Bryant had crossed a line between passionate preaching and outright fear-inducing performance. Almost immediately after Jamal Bryant delivered his New Year's Eve sermon, the internet lit up. Social media platforms were flooded with videos, clips, and first-hand accounts from attendees describing what they had just witnessed. Some called it the most intense sermon of the year, while others used words like demonic, terrifying, or even unreal. The reactions were polarizing, reflecting just how deeply the sermon had affected viewers. Within hours, hashtags related to the sermon began trending. Dark Jamal Bryant, Ikar's demonic sermon, Ikar New Year's Eve sermon, and Dark spiritual warfare were shared thousands of times, with debates erupting between supporters, critics, and observers who were simply stunned by the spectacle. Many supporters defended Bryant, saying he was addressing spiritual realities in a bold, unapologetic way, and that the intense language was a method of awakening people to the struggles they face in life. Some claimed that his confrontational style was part of his signature preaching, and that only those unfamiliar with his methods would be shocked. On the other hand, critics were relentless. Religious commentators, journalists, and ordinary viewers questioned the appropriateness of the sermon. Clips circulated showing Bryant pointing at congregants and making intense statements about spiritual possession or demonic influence. Critics argued that this crossed a line from inspiring preaching into fear-inducing rhetoric, leaving vulnerable members of the congregation potentially traumatized. Some argued that a New Year's Eve sermon, traditionally a time of reflection and hope, should not include such dark, confrontational messages. Mainstream media outlets also picked up the story, framing it as one of the most talked-about sermons of the year. Articles highlighted the theatrical stage setup, the intense delivery, and the dramatic spiritual warnings, often using phrases like viral sermon, controversial message, and intense spiritual warfare. Interviews with congregants provided additional insight. Some attendees described feeling a mix of fear and awe, while others said they were left questioning what they had just seen. Online debates didn't stop at casual commentary. Religious leaders and theologians began weighing in, analyzing Bryant's preaching style and the potential implications of such intense rhetoric. Some argued that his approach was a form of modern evangelism, designed to capture attention in a media-saturated world, while others criticized it as sensationalism that risks alienating congregants and confusing viewers about the purpose of spiritual guidance. Meanwhile, memes and commentary videos exploded across platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, further amplifying the viral nature of the sermon. Clips of Bryant's most dramatic lines were shared thousands of times, often with humorous or exaggerated captions, which only fueled the discussion and made the sermon a cultural moment beyond the church walls. The viral attention also prompted more scrutiny of Bryant himself. People began examining his past sermons, interviews, and public appearances, analyzing patterns of intense spiritual language and dramatic presentation. While many praised his boldness and energy, others expressed concern that his style could blur the lines between motivating preaching and fear-based messaging. While the public was reacting in shock to Jamal Bryant's fiery New Year's Eve sermon, whispers of behind-the-scenes controversies began to emerge, details that painted an even more complex picture than the one captured on camera. According to multiple insiders, the preparation for the sermon was unlike any other service Bryant had delivered, involving intense rehearsals, strategic staging, and carefully orchestrated moments designed to provoke strong emotional responses from the congregation. Staff members who requested anonymity described an environment that was tense and highly controlled in the days leading up to the sermon. Lighting, sound, and even congregant positioning were reportedly designed to heighten dramatic tension and create a sense of urgency. Some insiders claimed that the sermon's dark and theatrical aesthetic was intentional, crafted to leave a lasting impression, and, some say, to go viral on social media. One staff member revealed, "Every detail of that night was calculated. Jamal wanted people to feel the intensity, not just hear the message." But it wasn't just stagecraft that raised eyebrows. Multiple sources hinted at conflicts behind the pulpit, including disagreements among church leadership over the content and tone of the sermon. Some staff reportedly expressed concerns that the aggressive spiritual language could alienate members or even be misinterpreted as fear-mongering. Others reportedly argued that Bryant's approach pushed boundaries in ways that were spiritually questionable, prompting debates within the church about ethics, accountability, and the responsibilities of a pastor to their congregation. Perhaps most striking were claims regarding what happened immediately after the sermon. Some insiders alleged that several congregants left the service visibly distressed or upset, with some seeking spiritual counseling to process the intensity of what they had witnessed. Church leaders reportedly scrambled to manage reactions and reassure attendees, trying to mitigate any fallout while Bryant's viral clips were spreading online. There were also hints of controversy involving Bryant's personal conduct behind the scenes. While these claims are unverified, multiple sources suggested that certain elements of the sermon may have been influenced by personal motives or strategic attention-seeking, rather than purely spiritual guidance. Critics have long argued that Bryant's sermons occasionally straddle the line between passionate preaching and performance art, and this service may have amplified that perception to an unprecedented degree. Meanwhile, as insiders spoke out, social media discussions only intensified. Analysts dissected every moment of the sermon, comparing it to past services, noting shifts in tone, and speculating about Bryant's intentions. Some posts highlighted that while the sermon's message focused on spiritual warfare and confronting evil, the intensity of the delivery, combined with visual theatrics, created a spectacle that some argued overshadowed the underlying spiritual lessons. The combination of insider revelations, congregant reactions, and viral social media content created a storm that Bryant himself could not ignore. The sermon, which was meant to be a powerful spiritual experience, became a flashpoint for public debate about preaching styles, accountability in ministry, and the potential consequences of high-drama religious performances.